Yo, what's poppin'? Welcome back to another episode of the Taylor Talk Celtics podcast. I'm joined by Jack Quantrill of the Drop Step podcast and the NBA podcast with Morten Jensen, who works for Yahoo Sports. Jack, man, last time we did the podcast, I was guesting on your show. Now you're doing me a solid as I continue this co-host search by jumping on and guesting on my show. So for anyone that doesn't know, Jack covers the NBA at large. He's not a team specialist in terms of he's not just trying to break down one single team. But today, that's exactly what Jack's going to be doing. How you doing today, Jack?
Adam, I'm good. I just want to say to your loyal Celtics fans out there, when Adam came on my podcast, when he came on the Drop Step, we looked at their phenomenal statistical profile before the playoffs, and we went through and we questioned and compared them to former champions. And I think we concluded, Adam, that yeah, they were right to be championship favourites, and it all played out. You've got the hat on to prove it. So yeah, good omens whenever we link.
Yeah, good omens. So we might have to do that closer to the playoffs, and we'll go through another statistical dive of teams trying to go back to back and how those stats look when trying to go back to back, and we'll try and break it down that way. Just for the good omens, just for the vibes, right? It's what the kids say, for the vibes.
I've got half of it there already. I've just got to do another half, and we're fine. It's really saving me time if we do that pod, so I'll lock it in now.
Lock it in, and then we can just cross post to both, and then so everybody knows. Come back here towards the playoffs. We'll have some statistical analysis for you, which isn't really my strong suit, if I'm being honest. But gotta get comfortable being uncomfortable, which is exactly what I'm about to make you do. So, I've been on this co-host search for a minute now, so that's meant I haven't been super consistent trying to fix that by bringing in guests, which means I haven't spoke about at all really in verbally. I've wrote about it a bunch. Payton Pritchard's just insane start to the season. 6-man level start to the season, leading the NBA in total points scored off the bench, total threes made off the bench, leading the NBA, top 5 in the NBA for total assists off the bench. I think he's around top 10 for total rebounds off the bench. Just an absolute monster of a start to the season for the dude. To me, he's been one of the most impactful members of the Celtics rotation so far. Obviously, Porzingis has been out for the majority of the year. Jaylen Brown missed a couple of games. Drew Holiday, that's a conversation to have within itself. But this Pritchard kind of emergence, is that something someone outside of the Celtics fan base was you expecting this kind of explosion?
So I think I've come kind of full circle on it, where I remember maybe 18 months ago when I think Peyton put in not necessarily a trade request, but he said, start playing me or I might want to move on a little bit. And again, I remember Bill Simmons saying, this guy can play. If this guy was on the Utah Jazz, if he was on the Brooklyn Nets, he'd be dropping 25 every night. And listening to Bill, you just think, that's ridiculous. That's some classic Celtics homerism there. He always profiled as a feisty player, as a really great shooter, and obviously had this sort of stellar college career as well. But I think maybe you could start to see flashes, definitely like post All-Star break last season, where the Celtics started to rotate away from that sort of nailed-on starting 5. They'd let a guy like Jaylen Brown, they'd let a Jason Tatum, they'd let a Derek White have a night off, and Peyton would come in and have this sort of much larger role. And I think it maybe hinted to us that something was coming, but the transformation in aggressiveness, I think, is what's really opened it up for Pritchard, because every season before this one, his sort of 3-point attempt rate was around the 60% mark. And this year it's at 78%. So 78% of the shots that he's taken this year are threes. He's got a 67% true shooting mark, which is Clint Capella-esque. That's not the kind of thing that your 6'1" point guard does. He's putting up 15 threes per 100 possessions. And I looked, it's like almost tied with Steph Curry. So the aggressiveness is the thing that's really impressed me. And just from an efficiency point of view, there really aren't too many players in NBA history that have been this height, that have been this efficient. So no one saw this come in, but I think that there were maybe hints along the way.
For me, a lot of it's down to comfortability. Like, if you look at the way his role has evolved since Ime Udoka. So when Ime Udoka was there, I remember very vividly, Udoka made a comment in a press conference, like, I want Pritchard to develop as a screen and pop guy. I want to use him as an inverted screener because we can create mismatches And he's good enough to be able to fire off the catch. Now, part of that was Pritchard was still young, and I felt he was very heavily predicated to only be able to create for himself off pick and roll offense. He needed a screen to be able to create separation just because he had a great top speed, but he hadn't learned how to control that burst as much. So the separation wasn't there and the after dribble scoring wasn't there.
Yeah.
Now, over time, Pritchard has developed his ability to, like, Luka Doncic calls it the slow step. Pritchard's developed a slow step. He's developed a little bit more body control in the way he cycles through gears, building up speed, lowering speed. But then this summer, coming into the season, his words were, I've been working heavily on adding a pull-up jumper to my game, being able to just pull up off the dribble and shoot, and being comfortable in a role where you know you're going to get minutes every night because he was like the 7th guy last season behind Al Horford, who was the 6th man when Horford wasn't part of that double big starting lineup. With Porzingis out to begin the season, Pritchard knew he'd be stepping into a 6-man role. And I feel like he's cemented that now just because of the way he's playing. But that comfortability coupled with the gradual improvements leading up to being able to shoot off the dribble, it makes sense that his 3-point percentage or total 3-point percentage in terms of volume has gone up, because now he's finding pockets that he couldn't find before because he wasn't comfortable pulling up off the bounce.
Yeah, and I think that's really applied to his catch and shoot game as well. You develop that pull-up jumper, but really it can also lead to a real sort of advancement in how aggressive you can be off the catch as well, because you're comfortable not having your feet set. You're comfortable not being in those ideal conditions. You're not PJ Tucker waiting in the corner for the ball to swing to you. And in order to get as many threes as Peyton gets up, you have to take not ideal shots. And like you said, Adam, if he's committed to this idea of the pull-up jumper, not only now it's just 80% of his 3-point mates have been assisted. Last year, it's actually closer to the 86% mark. So he has incorporated a little bit more of that pull-up 3-pointer, as you've alluded to. But I think it just means that when you're not comfortable, when your footwork isn't right, when there's a guy in your face, when the shot clock is winding down, he's obviously famous for the half-court heaves. I don't know if we can even call them heaves anymore. It just really lends itself to being able to be so aggressive. And I really think it just fits the mantra of this Boston Celtics team.
Talking of footwork, I've got 2 things I want to point out here. First of all, talking of footwork, I really like the fact that he's incorporated the James Harden double step back, because every time I see it, it throws me back 5 or 6 years where Harden debuted that step back, and it was like people were so confused. No, that's a travel. And Harden's like, no, it's not. It's a gather on the first step back, then it's a step back. And it gets a bit confusing because the timing has to be right for the gather step to count that way. And a lot of the time, refs are probably going to let it go because it looks nice. And if it's Payton Pritchard, you want him shooting that shot, whatever it may be, right? They're going to be far more lenient with Harden than they are with Pritchard. But that addition, in terms of being comfortable, knowing your role, having a green light to do that shit, and double step, and then being comfortable to shoot off the dribble into a double step back is ridiculous. And the fact that it's become a staple, more so now when I'm watching it, I'm like, that's the Pritchard double step back, not the Harden double step back. I'm loving that. The second is, and I've been looking at this through a lens of, I don't know if you read it, but Dante DiVincenzo had a really good interview over the summer where he's talking about the main takeaway he learned from playing with Steph. And in terms of his 3-point volume and his accuracy on the volume. And he was like, I learned that it's not about where your hips are facing, but it's about how quickly you can square your shoulders to the rim. He was like, forget your hips, forget your feet. As long as your shoulders are square and you can create that squareness with your torso and your shoulders, you're going to have a decent accuracy. And that's what he learned from watching Steph. Pritchard, I'm sure, listened the hell out of that interview, went back and watched some Steph and DiVincenzo tape, because bearing in mind, DiVincenzo had a similar breakout from perimeter last season.
Yes.
And incorporated that into his own approach throughout the summer, because his body mechanics in terms of the way he is contorting to get his shoulders lined up a bit more is night and day to what it was, even last season, 18 months ago.
I had Dave Love on my podcast. And for those that don't know, Dave is a great guy in the community. He's a NBA shooting coach. He's been doing it for about 20 years. Came on the pod in like the first week or so of the season, and we spoke about the mental side of shooting development. And the thing that we really got into that I liked, if anyone is a golfer out there and you've ever had a golf lesson, you're taught swing thoughts, right? Because if you want to think about my knee needs to be bent here, my hands need to be going back at this pace, I need to make sure that my eye's on the ball. If you're thinking about everything, you're going to be paralyzed and you're never going to swing your club. And I think what you're talking about there, Adam, is the basketball equivalent of a swing thought. It's, I have the natural shooting talent. I have the feel. What do I want to focus on when I'm getting into a game? And it's not, getting your protractor out and making sure that your angles are absolutely perfect. It's just that thought of, can I square my shoulders? Can I feel confident? And I think so much of it is, I'd love to really be able to figure out how much of it is the physical process of that squaring of the shoulders, how much of it is feeling like in your head, I've done that thing I need to do to be confident in my shot. Now I'm going to let it slide. If that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense because, again, it comes down to comfortability, feeling comfortable. And I like to try and do this. I like to go from really technical conversation into the most simplistic way of saying it, because I feel like the spectrum's so large in between that people can sit wherever they want and just do that research to build where they want to build, if they want to. But I agree. I think me personally, as a terrible golfer, absolutely awful. That makes sense because I don't think swing thoughts, but when I'm on a basketball court, I think shooting thoughts. I try to focus more on, I'm big at the minute on not collapsing my shooting guard. So if I'm in like the park and I'm shooting, obviously we don't have indoor courts here. Maybe in London, you've a bit more benefited from that.
I wish, mate. I wish.
No, I'm saying, man, we're shooting in the rain, in the wind. I'm always thinking of white men can't jump where he's going to adjust the shot 6 to 8 inches. So I'm like, right, I don't want my shooting arm to collapse backwards, right? I want to keep that 45-degree angle. So no matter what I'm pulling up from, if I'm pulling up off a crossover, if I'm standing stationary, if I'm just however I'm shooting at that moment in time, all I care about is I don't collapse that arm. And once that becomes natural, I'll start focusing on the next thing that I want to tweak and the next thing. These guys do it at a million times higher level, and they do it under pressure, but they also do it all day, every day. They take thousands of shots a day. So it's second nature to be able to add modifications in on the fly and have them stick quickly.
But at the same time, it doesn't mean that they're like Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator and they have this different view and they see the angles, they see the trajectory. Their brain works a little bit like ours, where we don't want that cognitive overload. We don't want to have to be thinking about 20 things at a time. It's just about finding that thing as, can I feel confident with your not letting that shooting arm collapse? You're still doing 20 other things that you've picked up over the years when you're shooting a basketball.
It's just shooting thoughts.
It's just that one thought that sort of puts your mind at rest. Did you want to ask the big spicy question that you had when you said we were on Twitter? Because I've been thinking about that all day when I should have been thinking about teaching.
So the spicy question I've got, and I alluded to this, I tried to build it up a little bit, is Drew Holiday's getting older and he's still an elite defender. And one thing I kind of postulated in the mailbag I did yesterday for yesterday's Celtics Chronicle newsletter, if you're watching on YouTube, it's linked, go back and check it out, was last season, I just want to give the context here. Last season, Drew Holiday shot 60% from the corners. If you scrub out garbage time and stuff like Cleveland Glass does, that kind of led to a false narrative that he's an elite corner 3-point shooter, when over his career, it's just not been that way, really. 34, 36, maybe a push, a couple of 40% seasons, but 60% was such an outlier throughout the rest of his career. This crashed back down. Okay, he's crashed further down than what I expected him to. But now it's like you're getting older. Pritchard's just becoming this crazy entity of offense right now. Is there a world that you see, not this season, maybe not next season, where he's like, Pritchard needs to take over from Holiday and we'll have Holiday run that second unit with defense?
I personally, I would always stick with Drew Holiday, and I'll give you the reason why. So again, I've gone to play-by-play stats for this stuff here. If you look at the 23-24 season, just in terms of sheer net rating, when Drew Holiday was on the court and Payton Pritchard was off the court, the Celtics had a plus 11.3 net rating, and they had an 119 offensive rating in that. When it was just Payton Pritchard on the court last year, no Drew Holiday, they were actually a -3. Okay, so we'll park that for a moment. Now you get to this season, When Drew is on the court and Peyton is off, the Celtics have a plus 12.7 net rating because they're an absolute buzzsaw. But when Peyton is on the court with no Drew, they have a plus 15 net rating. So we've really seen a swing in how they're having that on-court impact. My issue is that the defense gets a lot worse when Peyton is on the floor.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at this team from an identity point of view, and when you look at it from a postseason point of view, I love that Drew, until he hangs it up, is going to be able to give you that. We really don't know who to attack out of this starting five. And I think that you have such a fantastic offensive floor. When it's Drew Holiday on the court this season, no Payton Pritchard, you're looking at 119 offensive rating. That's nothing to sniff at. That's great stuff. I would rather maintain a lower offensive ceiling, but a higher defensive one. And basically, don't give a coach an easy way out in a playoff series. Don't say, let's go and target Payton Pritchard 30 times down the floor. Have him be that sixth-man maestro. Have him actually run the show a little bit. And trust a guy like Jason Tatum to run the show with the first unit. And let Drew Holiday evolve into really just being that fifth starter, almost in a way that we're seeing Nick Batum do over the years.
Yeah.
Just be that super fifth starter. I don't care if you're putting up 7 points per game. You're just doing all the right things and you're not leaving a chink in the armor.
Okay, so I completely 100% agree. I feel like I was trying to trip you over a little bit there. Mainly just because no one's going to get angry at the NBA generalists making a wild claim, especially if I've set it up for you to nut down. There's going to be a lot of happy Celtics fans listening here. Okay, we avoided the stupid, silly segment of the conversation. What I will say is, in terms of defensive identity, I 100% agree, and I've wrote about this a bunch. This team, for all the accolades they get for being an offensive juggernaut, which they are, there's no denying that they're probably, arguably, unequivocally, whichever word you want to use, whichever adjective you need, they're the best offensive team in the NBA. What separates them is their commitment on defense. Maybe not so much over the first quarter of this season, but that's an anomaly. No one's been helpful. The starting five from last season has played 144 possessions together so far. So saying that they're not showing that same defensive identity is disingenuous, because how can you have that identity when that team isn't really on the floor together right now? What I will say is, I've always been a big fan of, you can have cold shooting nights, and the way this Celtics team plays is every now and again, the ball's not going to drop from deep. And for some reason, unlike most teams where one or two guys have a cold night, when one guy has a cold night for the Celtics, everybody goes cold. It's ice everywhere. Elsa's walked into the building. She's screwed shit up. She's singing Let It Snow in the back. You're waiting for Olaf to come walking through. You're like, what the fuck's going on? So that defensive identity becomes even more important, because you can hang your hat on defense most of the time because it's effort-based. It's effort and communication-based when you have the talent there already. So I completely agree. I'd keep Pritchard as that, I like to call it just a microwave, that Monte Ellis role, that microwave guy off the bench. Come in, do your thing, check back out, have a big night. Everyone's going to love you, but you don't have the same expectations on your shoulders. And I think that's where Pritchard plays his best basketball.
Yeah, not a ton more to add on my part, Adam. Like you said,
we went a little bit over on this segment. Here.
I didn't get tripped up. I'm happy I've survived segment one.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an ice hockey fan, maybe there's a little bit of checking going on there, just me trying to trip your skate. I'm not an ice hockey fan. I'm a Mighty Ducks fan, though. I don't know where that puts me in the spectrum, but I'm there. Okay, we're moving on. And you messaged me back when I sent you the topics for this, saying you had a little bit of a spicy one here. And so this isn't me trying to trip you up anymore. This is a very legitimate, I'm assuming, steeped in fact-based take that, to be honest with you, I'm not actually mad at. So what we're talking about now is, who are Boston's biggest threats in the East? So you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers are obviously on a lot of people's minds right now, first in the East, playing ridiculous basketball under Kenny Atkinson. Then you have Boston second, and I'm not going to run through the whole East, but you've got Milwaukee that seem to be resurgent, NBA Cup winners. The Lakers won the NBA Cup last season, didn't win a championship, didn't really contend for a championship either. Based on the omens, Milwaukee not really going to be there, but you've got the Bucks, you've got the Pacers that have struggled. Tyrese Halliburton's been all over the place. Who else am I missing here? There's a team I'm missing that's very Philly that isn't really a contender. There's a few out there. But then you came at me with arguably one of the better choices, to be honest, when fully healthy, which is Orlando. So I want your take first on Orlando.
So yeah, I think that definitely in the years ahead, this is the team that Boston probably has to worry about the most, because I spoke about defensive identity in our last segment when we're talking about Payton Pritchard, and it's something that Orlando has built this entire sort of roster on, has built this philosophy on, basically. And it's going to carry through for the next 5, 6, 7 years, however long they keep that core together. And I think you talk about every other team that we've just mentioned. You mentioned the Cavaliers. I think that over the course of a 7-game series, the fact that they're going to have Garland and Mitchell out there, the fact that the Celtics are built to abuse small guards, mismatch hunt, you can move the ball around, etc. I think that it's usually going to play out in the Celtics' favor. So even while I really respect what Cleveland is doing this year, I think it's incredible just the turnaround that they've got, even though they really haven't changed up the roster. I think they're always going to be at a little bit of a stylistic disadvantage against the Celtics. The Bucks, a little bit thin. Damian Lillard out there to hunt. I don't need to go over the hunt in the small guard thing again. The Knicks, they look to me like a pale imitation.
That's who I missed, the Knicks.
They look like a pale imitation of the Celtics, where they're built to play 5-out basketball. It's just not quite clicking at the moment. And they're almost, from a defensive point of view, if you drop Drew Holiday and you put Payton Pritchard in the starting lineup, that's almost what you're looking at, because they've got Jalen Brunson at the point, 6'1", fairly stocky point guard, but a guy that you're going to be able to target over the course of a playoff series. You said steeped, in fact. I've come at our guests, our listeners rather, with a ton of numbers in that first segment when we're talking about Payton Pritchard, but really it's a field thing to me with Orlando. I love it when a team can impose themselves on a playoff series, on a matchup. And I think that you can work out, as great as it is to be adaptable, whoever can play their basketball the most, I'm going to lean towards a little bit in a playoff matchup. And I think that of all the teams in the Eastern Conference, the Magic, to me, are the team that could probably dysregulate the Celtics, that could disrupt that offensive flow, because there's not someone to target. You can say Paolo Banchero when he's back fully healthy, but I'd much rather have a 6'10" guy that I have to hide on defense than I would a 6'2" guy at the end of the day. And I think that you could really get into a little bit of a slog, a war of attrition in a series with Orlando, where there are nice matchups all over the court. Ironically, I'm not going to suggest that we're going to see like 2003, 2004 Detroit, Indiana basketball in this series, because the league has moved on. And yeah, the Celtics do have that offensive floor. I just think that Orlando has the philosophy, has the identity to disrupt the best offense in the NBA. And if they do that, the Celtics are in slightly uncharted territory, because that hasn't really happened for the last 12 months or so.
And to be fair, the Magic were the team that gave Boston a bunch of trouble last season. I remember actually watching the game and being like, the Celtics beat the Magic, because they'd lost the first 2 times they played the Magic that year. So you're not coming at this from a wild sideways angle. There's proof that the Magic do play Boston. Now, there's an argument that the Celtics are so talented, they should just transcend whatever Orlando can do and just walk through them. And right now, the answer is probably yes, but Banchero's improved year on year. He's going to keep improving. Wagner's one of my kind of like darling players, where I just like watching him play because I think he's just polished everywhere. He's got a ceiling that's going to just keep going up. One of the more underrated younger guys in the league. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a winner. Last 2 teams he's joined the Lakers, won a championship, joined the Nuggets, won a championship. Is it going to be 3-3? Maybe not during his run there, but he's definitely helping set that tone and provide that veteran leadership and create that mentality and that mindset that's going to lead to a potential finals run from Orlando. I don't think there'll be a problem this year, but I agree with you. I think, Isaac, if he can stay healthy, is ridiculous. I think a year or 2 down the line, they're a problem, real problem.
Tell me, which team am I describing here? Okay, you have 2 big wing creators, the fulcrums of your team on offense.
Yeah.
You have 2 guys that you can't really target on defense that are proficient shooting the 3, but they've been there as like super role players. And your starting 5 is a guy that can actually space from deep, He's a little bit more versatile. He can play a little bit of the handoff game. He can roll as well.
It's Boston.
Forgive me, but Boston, but Orlando as well.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
made in like a mirror image, aren't they? I think that they're very much the young version of this team. And while I think like Boston probably matches up better to guard big wing creators, I just don't know if there's another team in the East that could quite make Boston so uncomfortable, because everyone else is going to have to adapt to them. I see a small chance that basically Boston has to adapt to Orlando, because they really play a different style of basketball to most of the other teams in the NBA.
No, that's fair. That's completely fair. Now, the only pushback I've got there is we've just seen how long it took for Boston to take that step to being a championship level team.
Yeah.
And for everything Orlando has going for it right now, they're in the Al Horford joins the team the first time stage, with Pope being that Horford guy. So they're still, in my opinion, 2 to 4 years away from being polished enough, experienced enough, and developed enough to be a genuine contender. I think they'll have some deep runs, and there's a chance that Boston run into them early one year and get shocked, and maybe we go 7, and it's anybody's game in the 7th. There's also a chance Boston just destroy them because they've got to learn playoff basketball, and but I get where you're coming from, and I'm on board with it.
Who would you be most worried about?
So I'm most worried about New York, and my reasoning is not because of all the names. Like, you can throw Carl Anthony. I'm a big Cat fan. I like versatile bigs that can space the floor and score everywhere. I like Jalen Brunson. The reason I'm a bit worried about New York is they've been created as this Boston light, but as you said about Orlando, they were created in Boston's image. The NBA is a mimicry league. We know that for a fact anyway. But what New York have done slightly different is, rather than building a team to go toe-to-toe with the Celtics, they've built a team where their best creators are at the guard position, but their best defenders are at the wing. And I don't think that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have faced a better defensive wing duo than Bridges and OG. And I feel if you want to take Boston out of their game and you want to force them to adapt to you want to take them out of their rhythm, you find a way of shutting down the Tatum Brown duo. And I think the team with the best chance of doing that, now that Kawhi and PG aren't together, and they were never healthy to do it anyway, is New York, because of that Bridges and OG connection.
If Mikal Bridges can wake up from this sort of slumber that he's been in to start the season, this guy's been traded for 5 first-round picks, and it's
not great.
He's almost still on the beach a little bit. I think there are worries about his hip flexibility. He's looked like a pretty fun fit on the offensive end. He's been incredibly efficient to start this season, but he looks to have taken a little bit of a step back for now in the first 23, 24 games on the defensive end. If he can get back to a level that he was maybe not even in Phoenix, because he was an incredible defender in Phoenix. Like you said, it's that tandem, it's that multiplier effect of not only having Bridges, it's having OG too, who I think is probably the real star of the show when we're talking about this, because he's so strong. You can maintain a little bit of a switchy defense if you wanted to. You're not going to get eviscerated by like a Porzingis switch, and he's one of the few players that could probably cope with that in the post. It would be really fun to see. The only other thing that I would have wanted to mention is, offensively, the one thing that I'd worry about from the Celtics' point of view is lightning quick guards. I think that they have so much strength across the floor, and when I say that, like in the lower body, that they can really cope with these bigger guys. And Brunson is someone that actually likes to get in your face, so that could be a really interesting matchup. If Philadelphia was healthy and Maxey looked like the Maxey last year, if De'Aaron Fox made a move over to the Eastern Conference, if Garland and Mitchell really get going, they're 2 guys that are quick enough that they can maybe puncture that defense and actually penetrate that shell. But it's just other concerns on the roster for me that keep them away from being real contenders against the Celtics.
Now, look, the Celtics fan in me will never admit that the Sixers are a threat. Ever. It's not going to happen. And it's true. You've got Paul George, you've got Joel, you've got Maxey. When healthy, they're a good team. They made some moves this year to be a contending team. It just hasn't gone that way. Part of me feels like Embiid's the problem, if I'm being honest. I think that's fair.
They've just been so desperately unhealthy. Yeah. Like now with McCain pretty much out for the rest of the season, Joel, that knee is being held together
and the
by
attitude as well. I feel like he's not. I don't know. Maybe I feel like maybe Embiid's in. I look at Embiid, and this isn't going to go well for non-Celtics fans listening in. I feel like Embiid, I look at him through a very similar lens to Zion. Haven't been able to stay healthy with your team. There's been flashes of upside, and Embiid obviously has been far more successful with Philadelphia than what Zion has with New Orleans, but stick with my train of thought here.
Yeah.
They just need a fresh start somewhere else. I think Embiid would be better. He's proven he's talented enough to be the first option on a contending team. I actually think he's better suited to being a second option because there's less impact on his body when you're playing that second fiddle. And maybe, I don't know. I don't really see Philly as a big threat right now. And
I can't get over the cast element with Joel Embiid, where usually you look at these guys and it's like they've got a bum knee, something's gone wrong with their ankle, whereas Joel has had Bell's palsy. His face has been fractured multiple times. I think he's probably going to get struck by lightning soon. They're the kind of injuries that keep Joel Embiid out.
He's the type of player that goes up for a dunk, lands, and a wild cheetah has entered the arena and just mauls him.
Exactly, yeah, kind of Talladega Nights style. There's a Puma in the back of the car. But yeah, I spoke to Trill of the Ball podcast, great podcast out there, really entertaining stuff. Go check it out over the summer. And I said about Joel, I think that his late career, he's going to transcend to this Brook Lopez type figure.
Yeah.
Where you become a guy that can do it. But like you said, you need someone to take that scoring burden, particularly during the regular season, off your shoulders a little bit. I really wanted Supernova Maxey this year. The shot looks a little bit broken for now. You can go and listen to other podcasts if you want to hear about why Tyrese Maxey's shot looks a little broken. I don't think we're going to get onto that in the Celtics one. But he's definitely a player that his team need to facilitate him and they need to nurse him through the regular season, because I think that knee problem is not one of those that's going to go away. He's apparently going to have good weeks, good months, bad weeks, bad months. And it's just going to be luck of the draw, as it's been every single season of his career so far.
And the problem with Embiid is he can be having a great year, but you're just never confident. And this is why I was so vocally, obviously I cover the Celtics a lot, but I have gigs where I cover the NBA overall. And one of the gigs I work for is a company called Yard Barker. And straight after the Paul George trade, acquiring, whatever you want, when they signed Paul George, I was like, they've made a mistake, because now they've bet on 2 All-Stars that can never be healthy. It's like you've bought a lottery ticket for the Euro Millions. Now, any American listening, it's not like the Powerball. Actually, it is. For us English people, we have a lottery. There's 66 million people in the country. So you've got a fairly decent chance of hitting some form of winnings. The Euro Millions is all of Europe, which is more like the Powerball for everyone out there, because Europe is a continent and you live on a continent. We live on an island. So they've bought a Powerball ticket and hope that they can get that one time. What they haven't realised is they're paying a heavy tax on that without even winning. So I'm just not there personally. Now, I do want to move on, because I've said the word Philadelphia far too many times. Like, that's my limit for the entire season. I don't know how I can bring them up again.
The 76ers who?
Yeah.
When?
There's a place called, I'll just have to call them like the Liberty Bell team or the City of Brotherly Love team.
The Pro Evo style name where you don't have the copyright rights. Yeah.
It's like NBA Live version of Philadelphia. Yeah. It'd be like, what would it be? The cheesesteak team. Okay, moving on. The final segment, and this is the one you were least comfortable with when we spoke about, but it's also, again, because I'm still in this co-host search, I'm not as there on everything, so I just want to get this discussion out there. Drew Peterson, Boston has an open roster spot. Over the last few years, they've been converting guys from Maine into like full-time deals till the end of the season, then running the rule. Personally, I like the idea of continuing to build that pipeline. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm so big on teams building a pipeline is, if you look at Miami, one of the reasons Miami is so good at being consistently in the mix is they've got great talent development. They find undrafted guys, they run them through the G League for a year or two, they bring them up, they develop them, they become core rotation guys. The same as Sam Hauser's done, Luke Cornett to a lesser extent, Nemi's on that way now. I feel like Drew Peterson could be that next guy. So he's started to get more opportunities over Jordan Walsh, who's on a full-scale deal in his second year with the team. Walsh hasn't really shown much. Drew Peterson, I just feel like he impressed during preseason. He's impressed during the minutes he's got. He's averaging, 11.2 minutes a game over 7 games or something around that mark. Doing that off the dome, so I might be a little bit off. Hits his threes when he takes them. Solid screener, decent rebounder, doesn't stay on the ball too long, moves without the ball well, and just fits what Boston are trying to do. Again, you're showing the world that, hey, we've got this pipeline, so when guys go undrafted, the higher end of the undrafted guys will look at Boston as a potential destination because they know there's a pathway. How do you feel about Drew Peterson?
I think that we're very quickly going to start talking about Boston as this Golden State Warriors-esque team where it's so much about your IQ and it's so much about fitting into that team style. Joe Mazzulla has said that the Boston Celtics offense is built off of what killer whales do when they hunt they hunt impacts, right? And I think that it probably takes a certain kind of player to be able to join that pack, even if it's only for 11 minutes per game. And what I've seen of Drew Peterson, which is admittedly little, I went and did my homework, as I told you pre-pod, Adam.
To be fair, none of us have seen much unless you're watching countless G League hours. And personally, I'm not doing that.
I think that he looks like a guy that knows where to be on the floor. I think that my one sort of reservation would actually be the 3-point percentage over the years. So if you look at his college stats, he shot through 5 years in college because he had that weird sort of COVID eligibility thing. He shot 35.8% from three throughout the entirety of his college career. Finished off his final season shooting 36% from three on 4 attempts per game. Now, that's not bad. He was playing 36 minutes. So he's not like this super aggressive. We started the podcast talking about Payton Pritchard taking 15 per 100 possessions. He's not super aggressive. It's not necessarily his role. I slightly worry about the shot because of how predicated the Boston Celtics offense is on the three. But I really love that sort of latent feel stuff of knowing where to space on the court, knowing to move the ball quickly. And I love the fact that he's 6'9". I think he's shown in a really limited stretch of games that he's able to help out on the boards. And once he catches that rebound, he's calm, can survey, keep the ball moving. And the Celtics collapse the defense better than anyone in the NBA. And he's been able to take advantage of that so far. Also doesn't look like complete mincemeat on the perimeter either. You look at a 6'9" white guy, fairly skinny as well for his frame. He's able to move his feet. Malik Beasley gave him fits in a sort of limited stretch against the Detroit Pistons a couple of games ago, but that can happen if you're coming up against a nuclear shoot. If they have confidence long-term in the 3-point shot, if they're confident it can hold at 36%, great, sign him up. He's got all these ancillary skills. It's just, in order to get on the court in Boston, that 3-ball needs to go down, and you just need to be confident that's going to happen with Drew.
And this is the concern that everybody should have. The pushback I've got is, Jordan Walsh isn't hitting threes either at the moment. The only difference is Jordan Walsh has, to me, he's a better defender. He's obviously known for his defense, but I think his wingspan is really, what's the word I'm looking for? Unique, because his wingspan. Have you seen Jordan Walsh's wingspan? It's ridiculous.
There's a guy in the draft called JoJo Tugler this year who has a 7'9" wingspan, and he's 6'7", and wild. You can't even do that on 2K, but Walsh is cut from that same cloth.
Yeah, Walsh can contest the shot while being at the elbow because his arm just go gadget arm, and he's just everywhere, dude. There is an argument to keep Peterson on this 2-way deal and continue to develop him, but also push Jordan Walsh throughout the season. The only reason I'm bringing up Drew Peterson is the Celtics still have an open roster spot. Peterson knows the team. He's obviously already going to have relationships with guys in the locker room. And I'm always concerned when bringing in external talent midway through a season, especially talent that's barely going to play, and how they're going to fit, how they're going to accept their role. Whereas Peterson would come in, he wouldn't expect too much because he already knows what's going on. He knows the score. He doesn't need to learn a system. He just slots in. And that's why I look at Peterson more than being you need to go and look in the free agency market and pick up a vet, because that vet might have dreams of, I'll sign this deal to play 1 game in 10, but really that 1 game I'm going to earn consistent minutes for the rest of the season because I'm a vet. It don't work like that, unfortunately, and that's always been my concern when talking about filling these 15th roster spots over the last 2 or 3 seasons.
The other thing that tells you that you should sign Drew Peterson to that deal is that the team that originally picked him up in Summer League after he went undrafted in 2023 was the Sioux Falls Skyforce, aka the Miami Heat's G League team. So they identified him as one of those guys that could potentially fit into that system long term. Adam, you opened this segment talking about we need to build that same culture, especially if you're going to commit to being a second apron team over the next couple of years. You've got to find guys that can plug gaps. So go and steal all of those Miami guys while you can. Make sure that they stay in your ecosystem and they don't find themselves in South Beach.
Stevens is doing that. Like the Celtics beat the Miami Heat to land Sam Hauser as a two-way guy originally. I remember speaking with Sam Hauser. I think it was a week after he signed that two-way deal in Boston. Like I had an interview with him, and where he was then to where he is now is absolutely wild. Like I could never dream of landing a Sam Hauser interview now. Landed it easily back then, which is wild to think, right? But when you look at it, they beat out Miami, but then they've consistently developed through the G League since then. Again, I've just gone through a few names. Luke Cornett was a G League guy. I know he'd been around the league a little bit, been in New York, been with Westchester, blah, blah, blah. But Boston put him in their G League development plan, got him used to their system, pumped him up. He's a core contributor for me, third big on in the rotation. Nimi, similar thing, been around the league a little bit, plugged him into that main development system. Now he's the fourth big, arguing with Luke for that third big in the rotation. I'm a fan of Drew Peterson. I'm saying to go and take him with that 15th roster spot. I'm also expecting some people to message me and be like, nah, don't do that. Go and do this. And I'm happy to have those conversations too. With that,
I would say, at the end of the day, it's a 15th roster spot on still one of the most stacked teams in the NBA.
It don't really matter.
One of the best starting fives we've ever seen assembled. I think it is where I'd want to concentrate my backup plan, because Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown never get injured, but it is the spot where the Celtics are probably thinnest if one of them ever does go down for a game or two. So you have these sort of supporting guys that can come in, particularly at the big spot. You've just spoken about Luke Cornett. You've spoken about Cater as well. And obviously, we've debated whether Payton Pritchard should be starting and vying for all-star contention, let alone coming off the bench. So you're set at guard unless a plague really befalls that backcourt. So I don't mind the idea of just getting another wing in the room to complement Sam Hauser off the bench.
I'm completely with you. And with that, I'm going to let you plug whatever you want to plug, and then we'll get out of here. Let everybody get on with their day.
Yeah, Adam, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast. Hopefully I've come off well to your loyal fan base. Guys, if you would like to listen to a general NBA podcast, a nerdy one at that, check out the Drop Step. Links will be in the description. Yeah, we're talking about a lot over the next few weeks. I've just had Charlie Cummins from Swish Theory on to talk about the Utah Jazz. So if you missed Danny Ainge, if you want to hear what he's up to now, what his grand plan is to build his next contender, make sure to check that one out, because we're a little bit confused, but we're a little bit excited about what's going on in Utah. But I'm more excited about the Celtics and their chances of a repeat. So happy to come back and talk Boston whenever you are, Adam.
I appreciate it. Everybody, you can get used to Jack being a regular guest over here on Taylor Talk Celtics. As usual, go and sign up for the Celtics Chronicle newsletter. If you're listening from the newsletter, just know I appreciate y'all. I'll catch you all soon. Everybody have a great day. Peace.